All right, I hope the cameras aren't recording this. I just found some juicy like fan art of oh wait, no, that's what the character actually looks like. Oh. Jessica Rabbit's actually just a really hot cartoon.
God damn it.
Wow. I mean, I thought this was fanfic. I mean, yeah, what's up, guys? Welcome back to
Overtly Critical, folks. This week, we watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Hell yeah, same guy who did Forrest Gump and Back to the Future.
Polar Express.
And Polar Express, Adventures of Tintin, a really underrated director, and this is probably my favorite film he's ever made.
So this was my pick for the animation category. I'd never seen it, but I've heard a lot about it, and I wanted to do a Robert Zemeckis movie at some point. So I figured this would be fun to do. And I think I gave my thoughts first last time.
I think you did.
So you go ahead.
So this movie is a film that I was raised on. My dad loves this, and he played for us, my brother and I, when we were really pretty young, and we just grew up rewatching this all the time because we also grew up on like those classic Bugs Bunny cartoons. And I think this is just such a unique film. It's really funny, just the way it blends this like noir detective with this absolutely insane cartoon world. And on top of that, the movie is just a love letter to fans of cartoons. It's got so many unique references, some that are pretty obvious, like, you know, classic characters, but also some that are kind of in-jokes that you're only going to get if you've seen a bunch of cartoons. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a well-made film, too. It's got a good story that's pretty easy to follow, that is surprising at times, and it's such a rewatchable film, very quotable as well.
I think that technically this film's a period piece, which I find an interesting thing because it's in the 1940s. It takes place in 1940s America, and I like that not only did they take a genre that was popular at the time, film noir, but then they mixed it with other media that was popular at the time, which is these slapstick cartoons. And then on top of that, another layer of that, a plot element of the film is literally like the interstate highway system. It's kind of a clever way to mix all of these things, especially film noir and those cartoons that at the time, in the 40s, nobody at that time probably thought of mixing those two things. So it's really interesting that in retrospect, they went back and did that, sort of as this like alternate universe sort of thing, alternate reality. So I was really a fan of that because I think it takes the best parts of these very different genres, because like slapstick animation and film noir, you couldn't think of like two things that are more different, but somehow this film makes them work, and it has everything you want from a film noir. It's got the classy music, it's got a strong main character, it's got an interesting plot that has some twists and turns here and there, it's a good mystery, and then it has everything that you love about cartoons, and it even brings some cartoon elements into live action, and ultimately having cartoons interact with live action, it really makes it's a really good love letter to cartoons in that it makes you sort of break down the absurdities of cartoons, like, you know, birds flying around their head and crazy shit like that you don't even think about, but putting it in live action, it just makes you think about the conventions of animation too, which I really appreciate.
And at times the animation, the blend of animation live action doesn't quite work, but overall it is done spectacularly well. It is aged really freaking well. They do these great techniques that I am not nearly qualified enough in animation or visual effects to really break down. I did watch Corridor Digital does a video where they break down the effects of this movie, and one of the things they did is they would use real props and like sort of puppeteer them around, like in that scene with the penguins at the nightclub. All those trays are real, and they're actually being moved around like with wires. Same with the octopus, and then they draw it in later.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can tell that the motion doesn't quite line up, but it works pretty well. When they need you, when they know your eye is going to pay attention to some of the movement in the scene, they get it really well.
One of my favorite things about this film, and we can get into like the story in a minute, but just on what you said, I like how sometimes they make a choice to make things animated or not. Like a lot of times, animated characters are holding things in live action when they could have easily just animated an animated gun. They make the weasels hold actual guns that they filmed on screen. I find some of those choices, whether it was just for the challenge of it or just to better blend the worlds. It was really well done.
I really love how they will also take these cel-shaded characters and give them shadows and cast some light onto them to really bring them into our three-dimensional world. It's that extra little step that they need to give these characters to really sell the immersion. And it's done beautifully. That part is done flawlessly, in my opinion.
So this is based off a novel by Gary K. Wolfe called Who Censored Roger Rabbit. There's a lot of changes from the book to the film, because in the book it was originally comic strip characters, and then there were, and obviously, actually in that one Roger Rabbit dies, and instead of them actually talking, the characters in that book have like speech bubbles, which kind of would have been cool in film as well. But either way, they kept this basic idea of the concept. But in this one, we have a detective, Eddie Valiant, I believe, who him and his brother used to investigate like crimes with tunes or things of that nature. But then his brother was killed by a tune. How was he killed?
Dropped a piano on his head.
That's another great moment of the film where it's like they're taking these stupid animation things and they're putting it in live action, and it's so great. And then. So now he's like all pissed off, and he's a drinker, and then he's forced, I guess not he's forced, but he feels an obligation to help Roger Rabbit, who's being accused of killing a human the same way his brother died. So it's, in that way, I'll get to this later, I think he's a really well-written character.
Bob Hoskins playing Eddie Valiant absolutely, he doesn't quite steal the show because obviously the cartoon characters are larger than life, but he does a really good job playing the straight man to Roger Rabbit. It's a very, at times, understated performance. There's a lot of subtle moments where he's thinking about his brother, where you can just see something in his eye that I had never appreciated until now, this viewing of it. I'm sure you have a lot more to say about him, but I just really appreciated the performance.
No, I think it's just such an interesting idea for a character, too, just the world they've created. And there's so many times in the film where he is forced to come to terms with things, and he faces a lot of resistance. He's just, I think the exposition, it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it works, and you totally buy it, and you totally buy his performance. And then my favorite part of the movie, actually, is the scene where we first see him in his office, and he's sitting at his desk, and he looks at all the pictures and stuff, which I generally don't like when movies do that. Like, oh, look at all these pictures. I have memories and a life. Although I'm kind of guilty of that. I've written that before. But either way, if you can make it interesting, I think it works. And in this case, it was great because you get this the camera just moves across his brother's desk, and it's almost like you're moving through the timeline of their history together. And it almost feels like a kind of a dream sequence, and then it ends with him sleeping in the day. I really like that scene because that's a great scene that's like show not tell, and you basically, in that span of 45 seconds, 30 seconds, you learn everything you need to know about him and his brother. And it's just such a well-done scene.
When they're in the nightclub with the dueling pianos, which is a fucking hilarious scene, Eddie gets visibly nervous with the pianos and the cannon, which I think is just a great way to call back to the fact that, he is very much aware of the dangerous power of cartoon characters compared to humans.
Yeah.
Where everyone else in the nightclub is just laughing at it like it's a cartoon. Right. Just a really nice bit of characterization and acting on Bob Hoskins' part.
I want to talk about the opening scene because I think this is just a good place to start, honestly, or to go back to. The opening scene's really clever because it starts, I mean, if you don't know anything about this plot like I didn't, I wasn't sure if it was part of the movie or not. Like Roger Rabbit running around with his baby, I had no clue because I knew nothing about the movie. But I really like it that because this is a film, it's like they took kind of Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny kind of slapstick stuff, and they amped it up a little bit. The baby almost fell into a pit of knives, and they went so absolutely crazy with it because they can, and it's a movie, and it was excellent.
It's one of the funniest parts of the movie that has me in stitches every time I watch it. My entire family, whenever we'd grow up watching that scene, would all be laughing our asses off. It's such good slapstick.
So obviously Roger Rabbit is this cartoon character, and he's got this wife, and there's some shady stuff going on with his wife, who is Jessica Rabbit, who I mean, this is very film noir.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
Funny enough, I found this out. That is a line taken right from the book.
That's great.
Jessica Rabbit's such a weird character because it's like it's drawn very human-like, but it's also very cartoonish. It's kind of, it almost like doesn't fit with either world, if that makes sense.
I think Jessica Rabbit is to blame for the amount of Rule 34 art on the internet. I think she is the reason why there is so much fucking art of NSFW art of cartoon characters on the internet. Because Jesus Christ, she is so fucking hypersexualized, which is the point of her character. Oh, yeah. But like, good God.
One detail that I really liked is that when she comes out and Eddie goes to the nightclub and he like sees her there for the first time, we get Betty Boop is right there with him, and it's very much this like, because Jessica Rabbit's an original character, like so is Roger, so it's kind of this cool like passing the torch sort of thing. Like this is the old sexualized cartoon, and this is the new one. I found that really interesting.
There's a great aspect to Jessica Rabbit's character, which is she's very sexualized by like the movie and the male humans in the movie, but like in actuality, like she's a cartoon character. She doesn't like have sex. She's like, what do you like about I think Eddie says, what do you see in that guy? And she's like, he makes me laugh. She's like, I'm gonna make you carrot cake. It's just this incredibly sexualized character with this goofy ass rabbit. I love the combination of characters there.
Roger, you were a pillar of strength.
It's so good. It's kind of a subversion of, you know, making fun of like your expectations of the femme fatale type, and she's just, you know, literally that's just the way she's drawn. There's a couple of technical aspects I wouldn't mind talking a little more about. Okay. Something I noticed in this movie is that they basically don't do any handheld shots. I noticed one shot that I think might have been handheld, but I think it was more they were just the way it was mounted to the car. And the reason why I think they do no handheld shots is it makes it much easier for the animators to put the characters in the scene later.
To be fair, they do a lot of, or that's true to say, they still do camera moves. Though. Like they certainly have a lot of jib shots and things too.
Robert Zemeckis, when he did Back to the Future, which I think predates this movie, what they did in part 2 actually to get scenes where like Biff Tannen, for example, was talking with his younger self, they programmed camera moves on like a special machine so to perfectly replicate it. I wonder if they did that in this movie so they could get a blank slate with no actors in it and then get one with actors in it so that they could, you know, do multiple passes for compositing.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm not sure, but I bet they did.
And cartoons also, because they tend to be a lot more static, they pay a lot more attention to like the environment, so they can draw that. It's complicated to move. Although Toontown is absolutely insane in this film.
Oh my God, that's a great sequence to talk about.
It's one of those things that's like totally absurd, but like the effects are done very, very well. And also I'd like to say, I like that you get moments where the cartoon characters, the weasels, are driving a real car, and then the live-action character, Eddie, is driving the cartoon car. You get these weird things, and then he holds a cartoon gun. They find like every way to combine everything. And then so when he goes into Toontown, which, you know, for budgetary reasons was like literally 10 minutes of screen time, if that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't expect the movie to do that, and that totally blew my mind. It's like this, part of it is the effects are like kind of cheesy, but it doesn't matter because it's a cartoon, so you're totally into it. I was a big fan of that stuff. It's like it's so surreal. It's almost like a trip because it's so surreal, especially that shot of like him in the street.
A lot of great slapstick there as well. I fucking love the stupid elevator sequence with was it Droopy the dog, or it's just like it's flying around the elevator. It's really a fun sequence. I do agree that the budget of the movie is kind of, or rather the technical limitations of the time are kind of put on display there because there's a lot of shots where Eddie really doesn't look like he's in the scene. But that almost works because he's a human character. He should feel out of place in Toontown. He is.
I think that helps it, definitely. Helps the believability, at least. One detail I noticed, and I don't know if this is on purpose, but when Eddie comes into his office, he hangs his hat on this statue, and I think it's a reference to the Maltese Falcon. it's probably the most famous MacGuffin in film, other than like the box and
There is a
Pulp
MacGuffin in
Fiction.
this film, the will.
Right, and it's just such a cute little detail. I think it has to be on purpose because it is a film noir, and Maltese Falcon's a film noir. I love that. And there's also some very, very funny, witty lines in this movie. I think it's in that same scene where Jessica Rabbit says, "I'm just drawn that way," where she's like, my offer stands firm if you know, shit like that, or what's the middle of a song called? A bridge. There's a lot of really funny lines.
My favorite line in this movie is with the handcuffs and Roger Rabbit. You know, they've been handcuffed for a while at this point, and Eddie's trying to saw through. He's like, "Ah, man, I can't. It's shaking too much." So Roger removes his hand from the handcuffs to hold it, and he says, "He's like, you could do that at any time. No, only when it was funny."
That's so good.
It's the best line of this movie, and I laugh my ass off every time that scene happens.
Or when the bartender character, I forget her name, in that, oh my god, the same scene keeps coming up. When she walks in on Jessica, what's her name? Dolores walks in on Eddie and Jessica Rabbit. She's like, "I caught you with your pants down." Stupid shit. There's a lot of really funny moments, and I think probably one of my favorite parts is, I think the end, where Eddie is almost forced to become a cartoon character when he's doing all these goofy stunts. He's trying to laugh them to death. It's just another thing that this movie does that kind of just tries to combine these two worlds, and it's very, very funny.
There is sort of a lesson in this movie of, I wonder if you'd say it's the most coherent lesson this movie has, which is the idea of learning to laugh again and learning to have a sense of humor, because Eddie is someone who is like, you know, he had this trauma in his life that has put him down kind of a dark path, and he has to learn throughout the movie to get in touch with what he used to love about cartoons. So he does defeat the bad guys basically by going to their level of like goofy gags and silly props. Those are great props, by the way, too. The invisible, the slap-on hole, the stupid giant magnet, the hammer. It's so goofy.
Was there like a fucking like Frank Sinatra sword?
Yes, there's
or
a
something?
singing sword.
You're definitely right that that's kind of an extension of the contrast between Roger and Eddie being these totally different personalities. One is super bombastic, and Eddie's like, "Leave me alone, I want to drink."
It's that classic, you know, straight man, funny man character dynamic that you see everywhere in media.
I really like the little subplot, or not subplot, but the actual plot about like the interstate highway system. And it's like,
only a toon could think of a lame-brain idea like that.
What the hell is that? Well, because the funny thing is, like,
what the hell is a freeway?
Obviously, that was a government thing, but I like that this film is showing, like, how just, like, corporate greed just tries to get its hands on anything and exploit any possible thing. And I think another thing relating to the character, something Doom, is he just...
Judge Doom.
Judge Doom. It's not a stupid name.
Yeah, but Christopher
Lloyd,
fucking Lloyd's kills it in that performance.
I will give this movie a lot of credit, especially on the animation side, for making me very like empathetic to the animated shoe when he's like burning it in the dip and he kills it. Like that is such a...
It's a disturbing scene.
It is, and I think that's one of the moments in the film, like speaking of Eddie's character, that like he has this sort of history with toons and he's very prejudiced, and that was even too much for him. He's like, all right, this guy's kind of insane.
You know, Christopher Lloyd really is perfect casting for Judge Doom because the man looks like a cartoon character already. He's got those kind of exaggerated facial proportions, and he can move his face in ways that you don't expect. You know, he was kind of like a previous generation's Jim Carrey, I think.
I was having a lot of thoughts about The Mask when I watched this movie for some reason, just with like a lot of the effects.
You know, this movie almost is like, I don't know if it's a spiritual successor, but there's a lot of connections you can see and drawn between this and Heavy Traffic in that attempt to blend live action and cartoon world. And it's a very different approach. It's a much higher budget approach that was done later, but it is kind of interesting to see the evolution, that this is something that people have been playing around with for many decades in cinema. This movie also is kind of like the best example of a PG movie, or what a PG movie should be. Because nowadays the rating system is like crap.
Everything's PG-13 anyway now.
It used to, the rating system used to matter. And this movie is great for PG, for, parental guidance, because this is a movie that's not going to have anything that's too heavy for kids, but it's got some of those more adult themes and some adult jokes. Instead of nowadays where a PG movie is like a Disney film where they make one sex joke that's so subtle no one's going to get it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. This film doesn't really, and obviously like you said too, the film has this very happy lesson. It's almost like this very childish, not in a bad way sort of lesson where it's like this character just needs to be more like a cartoon, more like a kid, just laugh and smile. But no, you're definitely right because I mean, we certainly thought this was fucking hilarious.
I think we needed. I think we needed this movie after watching so much heavy shit in a row.
I guess that's all I really have to say until our lesson. So, I guess we got to talk about the crazy sound in this movie, which I guess it has. So
yeah. All right, come up here, Dan. Let's knock this shit off the fucking desk here, and let's get to rolling. Whoa, Dan! Okay. When did you get here?
I drew a portal and I jumped in here because I'm a cartoon in secret. I shouldn't have told you that. Cartoons. I shouldn't have told you that.
It's the gingers.
Yeah. Roger Rabbit, totally also a ginger.
That's true.
Gingers aren't real. They're cartoon characters. Tell all your ginger friends.
But that also means we're immortal. Drop a piano on me. I'd like to see you try. I mean, what's not to like? This movie explains in itself why it's so amazing. First off, a combination of two worlds. The world that is our world and the world that's really expensive to animate. And I think this is the first movie I think I've ever seen where it successfully combines the two without having a dominance of one over the other. Then again, they gave 2 times less screen time, so if they had more screen time.
That's right there.
That's true. Shows what it needs. So, if I had a lesson from this movie at all, it's that loud equals funny. And I've been saying this for years, and this is finally what I need to prove it. While we watched
He's got a theory here.
While we watched this, I personally was laughing like insane. The opening scene specifically, when they're recording the episode. Now I like that in general. It's like kind of like breaking the fourth wall of the fourth wall. And then, of course, I also don't expect a baby to sound like a 60-year-old man, but it's the element of surprise is what makes you laugh. And I think that was definitely what, aside from cartoon sound effects, that's what the human side kind of needs to make it funny. The human side of this movie is a lot more serious, and you have all these, well, like you said, like film noir style sort of things, serious, and I associate this with jazz. During almost every single scene with either Valiant with other humans or himself, or thinking about stuff that he lost, like say his brother, no spoiler, but his brother, all I heard was like this smoother, dark tone jazz, whereas everything in Toontown is either hyper or like funk jazz. And I kind of associate a theme with that.
It's also just a great way to make it more of a period piece, because jazz was very popular at that time period.
It's
a callback to noir as well. That aesthetic.
Right. This is a very classy movie.
The other fact of why this film makes loud equal funny is because you can get away with using a very loud sound effect right after a very serious scene. And for us as humans, we kind of draw towards emotion that's in the present and how you're supposed to feel based on what you're seeing. And then let's say, I don't know, like the scene where what's his name, Valiant is in his office and he's pulling down the bed and trying to go to bed, and he's like, another day, I'm gonna get some sleep and then we'll work on this tomorrow. And then boom, instant funny. You have Roger in his bed, and he's the element that stands out, and that's really like what sound designers want to go for, especially working with animation makes it 10 times funnier.
It's really just contrast and content, which is kind of the two worlds colliding. One of them is a lot more realistic and sort of mellow, and the other one is batshit crazy cartoon. So contrast is probably the word you're looking for.
Something I noticed in this movie is that generally when cartoon characters interact with the real world, they make cartoon sound effects. And I think that they kind of use that at times to hint that Judge Doom is a cartoon character. And it's like, he pulls a glove on in the first scene with the dip, and it makes like that cartoon snap. Exactly. But also when he writes the rabbit dip and the $5,000 on the chalkboard, it makes this over the top screeching. And in that same scene, he throws a record and it goes like through the air.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced they were doing that intentionally because I didn't notice as much as I thought I would upon rewatching it. But I still think that it might be intentional. Either way, I think it's cool.
The old car horn after Roger looks up and sees knives flying at him during the episode shoot in the beginning. He gets sent into the ironing board.
Yeah.
He gets sent into the
board.
ironing board, and he looks up and then knives. And that shit. First off, I'm sorry. But that's the whole point, is that it's super unexpected, and surprise, surprise is always what makes me laugh.
It's shocking. It's almost like it's a comedy jump scare, basically.
Yeah.
It's great. It's off-putting. It feels out of place when you see a fucking cartoon character make a train whistle sound.
Oh, definitely.
It's really
when
funny.
he takes the alcohol, I lost my shit at that. That was one of the best skits in this entire bit, to have him do a mental freak out when he tastes even the slightest drop of alcohol.
This is a bit of a tangent here, but that's another one of those great kind of more subtle references that not everyone will pick up on, where they basically rip off the duck season pronoun trouble bit with the you do want it, I don't, you do, I don't, you don't, I do.
During the piano scene with Daffy and Donald, okay, first off, I actually did not expect to see those characters in this film, and then I realized it's like, oh, well, they are tunes, and their rights probably cost a little more money, but definitely. And the fact that they're piano battling. First off, I don't think I've ever seen a really good piano battle in real life, and seeing it as a cartoon is just a lot funnier, especially when the piece is Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, which had been used in previous cartoons such as Tom and Jerry with the exact same effect, like in the episode The Cat Concerto, when Tom is playing it and Jerry tries to mess him up the whole time, and he just makes it the silliest freaking thing, and then it just ends at the end and everyone's just clapping for Jerry.
It's a good detail.
I'd heard that song before, and I tried to call back because I knew it was funny, but I didn't know where the funny was coming from. So I went and I looked, and it's like, oh yeah, it was used in Tom and Jerry, and I'm associating that kind of humor style with this song, and with this movie, it just reiterates it. Whoever the sound designers were for this movie must have had a fever dream when it came to Toontown. Nowhere in that entire bit of the movie was there any natural sound. You have to make everything, apply it in post. This is a post-production sound effect artist fever dream of a job, and I would have personally loved to do this bit as if I were working on the film. Give practical items the wrong sound effects on purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is for example, and this has been used in other things before, but when he was falling after going into the out of order men's bathroom, it wasn't even in the building, it was next to it, and falling from looking down. As he's falling, of course, he's gonna hit an object and not get hurt, but instead, you hit the metal pole and you don't expect it to bend, and it does because it's funny. And when it does, that metal pole that you'd think would sound like hitting something harsh or strong, just boom, and that kind of aspect always makes me laugh, and that's just more detail that draws in a good audience.
It's almost like this. It's a way to give the properties of something. It's almost a way to give something the properties of something else using sound effects. You make that metal flagpole rubber by giving it a rubber sound effect.
And a rubber animation. Animation definitely plays into the funny, but oh man, this film was way too much, and I hope we watch something like this again.
There is obviously a ton of audio that we are not even picking up on because we are all still students of our respective fields here.
Well, before I get carried away with what makes a cartoon reality or whether or not I'm crazy in the head, let's get back to these guys and what they have to say.
It's lesson time. We learned some things from this movie like we always do, so I'll give you what I learned from this film, or what I decided
All right, let's hear it.
to focus on. I'm going to take sort of a point of view of this, looking at it as a film noir, because I think that this film works really well as a film noir, and I think what those films really excel at is strong main characters with a point of view. Now, it doesn't go in the direction of a lot of film noirs where there's like narration or anything like that. It's not like we're totally in his headspace in that way. But there's a lot of private moments with Ed's character, and we spend a lot of time with him in the film. He is definitely, I'm not going to say he's the best character we've ever talked about on this show, but I think in terms of just showing his point of view and feeling empathy for him, I think this film just does it really well. I think that it explains everything. It doesn't drag on too long. I explained that scene of his history with his brother. We find out in the scene of the bar how his brother died. We don't need much detail other than that. And then obviously he has certain things that repeat through the film, like his drinking. So there's just, you can see the clear arc of this character. And I think, not that like, and again, because this is a PG movie and there is some element that this is sort of a family film in a certain way, it's, I think, different from a lot of films that we've watched, at least, just considering the films we've watched, where this is a character that starts as an asshole and he ends the film as kind of a nice guy. And I think that sometimes it's just refreshing to see that in a movie, because I think this is probably one of the most clear arcs we've had for a character. It's just very direct, and I think it works well in film noir.
What I really noticed this time watching this film, probably for the first time in my life with a really critical eye, is the amount of times that they set something up. You know, in writing, there's this idea of setup and payoff. You introduce an element early, and then later characters use it, or it shows up again. This movie does it a lot, really blatantly, and it's really useful from like an educational standpoint to watch this film to see those clear examples. I wrote down as many as I noticed, which was the first one I saw was Roger Rabbit says he's trying to get stars in that slapstick bit, and at the end he actually gets stars. It doesn't really affect the plot at all, but it's cute.
Yeah.
They bring up several times the idea of like, you're gonna die laughing, and that's how Eddie kills the weasels at the end. The disc being reappearing ink that Acme uses. Roger kissing Eddie.
Yep.
The editing machine in Arcane Maroon's office that Eddie later uses, and that revolving door when he confronts Arcane Maroon. The idea of public transportation, where it's like, we have the best public transportation in the world. Roger, the effect Roger has when drinking alcohol.
Oh, that's one.
The just sheer amount of cartoon slapstick props that are shown in Acme's warehouse when they first are seeing the murder scene. Every single one of those is used in the finale. And it's just the love letter that we think is just Roger being silly, but then it comes back as that was the will. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for any inspiration on how to do that in a script, this is a great movie to watch for that.
I would add a couple.
What did you notice that I missed?
Well, some little things like the handshake buzzer that they bring back a million times in the film. I would say more direct example is in the scene when the weasels come around the midpoint when Roger comes to Eddie's office. He realizes, he gets them to laugh. Even though, like you had mentioned, there was a scene of dialogue or a dialogue about laughing to death, we actually see the weasels lose control and laugh in that scene, and then that comes back. But also, one thing that I noticed the second time I watched was in the scene where Doom almost dips Roger in the dip, and then Eddie flips it over. We get a shot specifically of Doom's feet avoiding the dip. Which is
I'm glad
really
you
good.
picked up on that too.
I think it's very clear out of all of us who's the most cartoon.
It's time that we come clean, actually. So the fact of the matter is that Joey is a toon that we have held captive for many years at this point, and he is too dangerous to be let out in public, but you guys at home are going to get a chance to see his tomfoolery and buffoonishness right here, not live, but recorded live. And, God help us, take it away, Joey.
The 1947 monopoly of cinema. Disney, MGM, they rule it all. No one has rights and everyone's happy. I mean, all the rich people are happy. Huh? Wait. Is that Richard Nixon? Oh no, that's just the boss though. Booze. Wait a second. Two separate companies working together in a movie? That's impossible. That's just impossible. They're losing money. Man, classic 8-brain. Boob. Boob. Oh my god, giving stuff away? This guy's just like Mr. Beast. Today, I'm gonna be giving away my entire life savings. The f***, she's so bussin' good. Who treats women as sex objects? Come on, guys. Grow up. Get a life. I don't know, meet people. Meet actual people. Stop being in your goblin rooms. Erratic sounds. You know what they are. Patty cake, patty cake. Woo! Boing. And all those sounds would be Dan third wheeling for sex. A freeway. A freeway is gonna a freeway is gonna fix all the problems. Lower traffic. Dumb glorious billboards, motels, all the things, attractions everywhere. Oh, so you mean Disneyland? Bestiality. Anyway, I'm so glad that the tune survived because we can get some cool concepts. Like, I can't wait until a tune runs the White House. We get a JFK tune. Richard Nixon, Tunegate. There's so many possibilities. So many years that could be described. We got the 1970s, we got the 90s, we got 2001, we got the Toontown marketing crisis. You saw nothing, actually. Anything I've said that was literally just an exasperation of myself. That I am not a tune. I am not a fucking tune.
So, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? I really enjoyed this
Judge
movie.
Doom.
What?
Judge Doom framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
That wasn't a question. Just being very clear. I don't even think the title is a question. No, yeah, it is.
Yes, it
Is there a
is.
question mark? I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, so the film Doom Framed Roger Rabbit is an excellent movie. And I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's, honestly, thinking about a lot of those, like, PG elements, it really is a good kind of step back for us to watch a movie like this. There was a lot of really good blends of genre, especially film noir and animation, and I thought it paid a lot of respect to both. So
It is absolute love letter to both genres and mediums. And for next week,
better.
we have something that's kind of very different for this season. It's territory we've gone to before, and it is my favorite movie ever made, which for anyone who knows me well, if any of our friends are watching this, you probably know what's coming next, or people who, vote in the poll. But if you don't, I think you're going to be really excited to see us talk about this next film.
this is his Natural Born Killers. So I'm probably gonna have like this much input, and you're gonna be like, so this movie means this and this and this and this and this, and I'm gonna be like, oh fuck. So until then, like, subscribe, tell me what you think of, or not me, tell all of us what you think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Who do you think framed Roger Rabbit? I don't even know. So
Judge Doom!
he's lying. Until then, see ya.